Hello, everybody. Welcome to IST 140. I'm, of course, Professor S, and this is today's lecture. Today, what we're doing is we are talking about arrays and array lists. So an array is a very array and a list are very common data structures for programming. And we're going to be working with both arrays and array lists a lot in Java. So first of all, let's talk about what an array. So definition of array, at least for Java, is a collection of data of the same type in contiguous memory locations, each of which can be accessed by integer index. And essentially what we're talking about is memory that's essentially in sequential order. See, the thing is, it's like oftentimes in programming, we're going to want to keep some data together. And we'll see some examples as we go along. But one of those things to kind of keep track of the data is an array. And so the way that I always kind of describe an array is like a cabinet of cubby holes, right? So let's say that we want a cubby hole of 6 spots. We can't really add much to it. We could just, we can put information in it. We can take it out easy. It's kind of easy to go through, but we can't really add to it or remove cubbies as we would like. Another thing is that you have to specify a data type. So you have to have the same data type. So we can put in, like, let's say we have this cubby hole over here and we're going to just put doubles in it. And so we could put like ints, but they get converted into doubles. And each spot will start with 0 to however, like 1 less to what they are. And we're going to put different doubles in this array, okay? And of course, this is just an analogy. The actual array would look something like this. So over here, this is how we declare the array. This is how we initialize the array. The data types are mentioned in both the declaration and the initializing. And the 6 here, this is the amount of elements that we want in it. And so that's how it builds our cubbies like we had before. To add the values, we do these different lines right here. And so notice that we have the array mentioned, which in this case is called values, and then the index is in those brackets. Okay, now this is not the only way to initialize and add values. There actually is another way, and that's this one right here. So notice that we are initializing. We're actually also, we don't mention the data type except for up front here, but we fill it full of doubles in this case. But this would help determine the amount of elements. So notice that there's 6 of them there, and it sets the values all at once. Now, this seems like a very efficient way of setting up arrays, and this is totally a legitimate way of doing this, but I feel like of the times that I set up arrays, I very seldom use this. In fact, I use more of the other one because you often use loops to do it. So let's kind of get into an example of seeing arrays kind of in action and why you'd want to use it. So here I have some code. So what we're going to do is we're going to prompt the user for 6 numbers, right? And so we're going to store them as num1, num2, num3, num4, num5, num6. And so one of the problems is that we are continually asking for a number and we're storing it to a number. So we can actually, since we're like prompting for a number, essentially most of these lines are the same. So we can use a method to kind of do this repetitious lines of code and kind of reduce it. So I'm going to come up with this method called getNum, and I can use getNum in place of these lines of code here. So I was able to reduce the lines of code by half, right? At least. So it saves me a lot of spots. But one of the things that's an issue, so that we haven't gotten to arrays yet, but here's the thing. So we have 6 numbers. They're not like all together. If we want to call one of them, we have to remember that it's num3. So it's kind of hard to use variables to call them. So if we use a for loop to find one of them or something like that, it'd be kind of difficult. So instead what we can do is we can create a for loop right here. So I declared and initialized my array, and then we use the for loop to go through each individual one and we can replace those nums with these. And so notice that it's an int array that does all those things, but instead of storing it at num1, num2, num3, it's the 0, first, second, third, fourth, fifth spots. Okay. Now, let's say we also want to print those numbers. This is how we would have to do it before with num1, num2, num3, num4, num5. But notice that it's like this would just concatenate them all together. Well, actually, no, these are integers, so just add them all together. But let's say we want to add spaces in between them. There we go. Now, what we could do for the arrays, is we could do another for loop and go through. And so now if we decided we wanted to change the array, so we'll put that over here. But if we want to change the array size, then all we'd have to do is change 3 locations and say, like, if we want to do more, like if we want to do 7 spots, we do 7, 7, 7, and it would hit all those spots. Whereas before, what we'd have to do is we'd have to add a num7 to it. And then if we want to do 10, we just change this, change this, change this, and then we'd have to, if we did it with the original nums, we'd have to do 8, 9, and 10 as well, right? Assuming we already did that 7. So the idea is like we can keep all those values together if we want to use them. An example is like, you know how we had the catalog program to do before, where you have like 3 elements in the catalog? That was really looking for an array. An array would have been really helpful for that, because then you, instead of putting everything in a string, you put them in a what would be a string array, so that then you don't have to worry about how big they are really that much. You could just put first item, second item, third item, and you could refer back to them whenever you needed to. It would have been really helpful. Another thing that's really helpful is a thing called the enhanced loop. So a normal for loop looks like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take every single item from a array called values, and we're going to add it to sum. Notice that we use our index variable that we start at 0, and we go through all 6 of the indices to add it to the sum. Now, the enhanced for loop is really great because this does the exact same thing, but you don't have to really worry. You just create a variable that matches any specific value in the array. And this also works for array lists, by the way, which you'll see later. But any data structure, it goes through all of them and we'll add them together. So like the thing is like, you still have to create a variable and declare it here. And so you're declaring a variable here, but it will say, like in this case, each one will be called element. And so it's each one we're adding to sum and then storing it to sum. So both of these do the exact same thing, except we don't have to write as much in the for loop right here. Now, something to keep in mind with this is that for enhanced for loops, they go through all the elements in the array. So you can't just do partial of them. In a normal for loop, we can say we can go through however many we want to go through. Like we can start halfway if we want to, if we can stop halfway. You can't really do that with an enhanced for loop. You got to go through all of them. The other thing is like you can't modify an array this way. You could just cycle through them. So if you want to add all the elements to a sum, if you want to print every single element, or if you're searching through every single one, this could be a way that you do it. For enhanced for loops, super helpful. Okay. The next data structure that we're going to be looking at is an array list. And so an array and a list join forces to form an array list. So a list in itself is something that's kind of like a stack of papers, and very much a lot of the ways array list kind of looks more like a stack of papers for an array. But the idea is like with an array list, you can add things on top, you can put a sheet underneath, but it's not really like the cubby holes that you have before. And so the benefit to a list versus array is that it's much more flexible in the elements that are there, but the benefits to an array over a list is that it's kind of easier to go to any specific element in a list. And so what an array list does is has those two concepts of data structures join forces to make an array list. It's pretty sweet. So anyways, the only thing is, well, here's some things about it, is that you need to first import. And so you do that with import Java util array list. Very similar to scanner, except instead of scanner, you're typing array list. The next thing is you have to declare. And the declare is looks like this. And so notice that with the string, we have string here. So this is going to be array list of strings, but we have the less than and the greater than for our variable type. And then that's the name of the array list. Yes, the data type. And when you initialize, similar sort of thing, you still have to have the data type present. It's going to look the same as it did for declare, but you also have parentheses there. And you could do this on the same line. That's fine. I'm just showing you the difference between declaring and initializing. Just keep in mind that when you declare and initialize, the amount of values in your array list is 0. So you just have this thing that you could put values in. To add values, like if say you wanted to add a Monica to the array list, you do the name of your array list dot add and then whatever value you want to do. Make sure your variable or your value, your literal or whatever the value that's attached to the variable that is inside that parentheses matches your data type, or it will make sure it matches for you, right? So if you put numbers into a string array list, it'll convert it into a string. Let's say we want to add Phoebe specifically into that second spot. So remember, the index value is 1. So what we could do is set 1 and then the value. I don't think I use this one that as much. But like I said, this is like where it's kind of joining forces with a array and array list. And then if we wanted to get the fifth value, like if we wanted to see what the fifth value was, then we say get 4. Because remember, it starts at 0, and so the fifth value would be the index value 4. If we wanted to remove an item, that's also something that we can do, and that's where we just do remove and then the index value. Okay. Now, the weirdest thing about array lists is the need for wrapper classes. So the idea is it's like you can't use primitive data types for array lists. So you can't do this, right? Because int is a primitive data type. Instead, what you have to do is a thing called a wrapper class. So instead of int, you use integer, capital I. For instead of a double, you use a double with a capital D, so on and so forth. It's on the screen. You can see it. But the thing is like for the values that are in the array list, you can totally use the primitive data type. So let's say you have a like our bunch O numbers, excuse me, has integers in it. We can store one of those values to a so here I'm adding 32 to it. We can store that to a int variable. So that would store 32 to num. And so this would totally work. It's just when we're creating this array list, we can't use int. It has to be integer. Okay. Now let's compare array and array lists. So when we're declaring and initializing on the same line, it would look like this for an array, or it could look like that. And so that same named one would be this. And it's kind of like it. The font's kind of big, so it kind of goes on both lines for this one. And then for the array, in this case, this is 23 elements, and so far for the array list, this would be 0 elements. Because remember, when you declare and initialize a array list, it starts off with 0 elements. An array, it starts off with however many you said. To put in the first value, you say the first value, call it Chandler. To do that for the array list, you could just add Chandler. Remember, it's empty, so adding would put it into the 0 spot. and then whatever else the next one you would put would be in the second spot. To get a value, like let's say in the 0 spot, you just say whatever the array is and then the whatever index location you're looking for. You could do very similar for the array list. You just do the name of the list dot get and then the index value of that location. If we want to know the size of the array, we do the array dot length, and so it's very similar to a string where it's length, but there's no parentheses here. For array list, it's size for some reason. To add an element, that's not really something you do in an array because it's already structured, but to do it in an array list, you just add value, and that'll add it to the top or the bottom, however you want to think about it, where it's the next value. So if we have 0 already taken by Chandler, then whatever that next value would be 1. To remove an element, you don't really do that in an array. Like you can say, like set value, change the values in an array, but you can't remove the amount of values. But you can totally do that in an array list, and that's how you do it. And one of the things you can do in an array is when you're initializing, you could, with declaring and initializing, you can hard code those values directly into the array, but you can't really do that for a array list. That's not something you could do in one line. An array you also don't need to import, but you do need to for an array list, and we talked about that in the last slide. The next thing is two-dimensional arrays. And so two-dimensional arrays, they kind of look confusing at first, but really the way that I always describe them is that they are arrays of arrays. It's very meta. So the idea is, it's like, notice that we have kind of 4 elements in this array, and that's kind of like the amount of rows, right? And so notice that the length gives us the row length. So it says how many elements are in this array, or how many array of arrays do we have here, and that's 3. To find the columns, we say, all right, looking at the first row, how many elements do we have? In this case, this is 4. Okay, so to set this up, to declare and initialize like this specific one, other than just hard coding it in like we did on the left here, to like have it enter it in, we could set it up this way where we have 3 amount of rows and 4 amount of elements in each one of those rows. And then we'll start off with num1. And then I have nested for loops in here that will put those numbers in. And so this code right here will get us the same two-dimensional array here. Because remember, it goes through everything in white before it goes to the next value here. So it goes through all the possible values of j before it begins the values of I. So notice that j is going to be the column. So it's going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I advances to 1, and then j starts over at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, excuse me, and then I increases to the last value 2, because notice it's going to be less than this, and does the 0, 1, 2, 3, and I'm saying the values of j at that point. And that's what's going on here. So once it finishes for loop, that's when it advances to the next I. It goes through this for loop, and then it goes to the next I, so on and so forth, until it finishes both of those. Okay. The last thing that I'm going to talk about is copying arrays. So there are instances where you might want to copy array, and you'd be tempted to do this where you say, here's a new array, have it equal to the old array. And that is no bueno. Don't do that. Doesn't work the same way. And I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm just going to say there's a chance that your array won't work out. So it's better to loop and copy every single item individually, right? Just a simple for loop we'll do it. You don't enhanced for loop doesn't really make sense in this case because we're copying the specific values. You could do that with an array list, but not an enhanced for loop with an array list, but not with a whatever it's called, an array. So here we have new nums. Notice that it's the same length as the old nums. And so here we begin at 0 and it will stop when it gets to whatever old num's length is, and it increases by 1. And so it says that each one of those values will match up. And that's how you copy over. It's pretty. So that's what I got for you guys for today. I don't really have any more. I don't have any practice problems for you to do. What I encourage the class to do today is to start working on the zybooks since you don't have practice problems. That way you get kind of more familiar with the stuff that we kind of talked about today. So it's not just me telling you stuff and you hearing it. It gets you interacting with the material. Okay. On Wednesday, we'll walk through the code. You'll be able to ask some questions as we go along, but we'll try to take it a little slower so that if you have questions, you can answer them then, or they can get answered as we go along. Okay. Try to make it as interactive as possible. Anyways, I think that's good for today. I'll see you all Wednesday. Bye. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please press the like button below. It lets me know I'm doing something right. If you have any questions about any of the content, please send a message in Canvas to both me and the rest of the teaching team, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you have any suggestions for how I can make these videos better, please leave in the comments below. Don't forget to roundhouse kick the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified for when I post the next video. Anyways, I think that's good for this video. I'll see you all later. Bye!